Hi. You want to know about our family? I think I'll start with my father coming to America. And we all called him Papi. Most of you kids know him as Papi. And when I was young, I called him Popsicle, Pop, Pa. And he called me Sweets. He always called me and my sisters Sweets. And my mother was sweetest of them all. And he came from Poland when he was 9 years old. And it was kind of a long story how that happened. But back in early 1912, when my grandmother, Anna Gubawa Kapala, found herself to be pregnant with her third child, Papi, who happened to be Papi, she got notice from her mother in Poland that she was going blind. And it's possible she might have had even what I have, the macular degeneration, because sometimes that's hereditary. But her mother, my great-grandmother, was all alone in Poland and needed help. So it was decided that my grandfather, Jacob, would sell his business here. He was a butcher. He had a butcher shop in Union City. And he would sell that and give her whatever money he had right at the moment. He gave her money to go back to Poland to build on an addition to their house, which was in Gorlice, Poland, at the bottom of the Carpathian Mountains there. They were mountain folk, mountaineers. In Polish they call them górale. And so Papi's family came from that southeastern part of Poland that bordered on Austria, Czechoslovakia, and they were very close to that area. And anyway, my great-grandmother went back to Poland with her other two children, my Aunt Helen, who ended up marrying Bugaj, and my Aunt Annette, who everyone called Yanka. And those girls were older than my father. But she took them with her back to Poland and was there with her mother. Meanwhile, my grandfather, Jadek, was trying to sell his business here, and then he was going to go join them back in Poland. However, World War I broke out, and they had a ban. You could not get into Poland, nor could you come out of Poland. So the family was apart. My grandfather couldn't see his children or his wife or anything for about 8 years. And same thing, they couldn't come out of Poland. So in the meantime, he was here in America working, doing what he had to do, and she was there. My great-grandmother was with her mother, who was going blind, older lady, and her two daughters, plus she had my father, John, in November 19 of 1912. He was born. And so that was the family. And also there was a man who was a caretaker on the farm, and his name was Stanislaus Jopek. And he kind of looked after the farm animals and whatever had to be done around the farm. And that was the only man that was there. And my father remembered because he came to America when he was 9. 1921 is when he came to America. But he, even at that age, he remembered having to take the cow or whatever they had, whatever animals they had, cow, maybe 2 cows, and all the boys in the village would collect everybody's animals and take them up on a mountain. And they'd have to stay with the animals all day. They couldn't just leave them there in the fields because there were wild animals, wolves. Mostly it was wolves that might attack the cows and whatever, goats, whatever they had there. So the boys that took care of those animals for the community, they had to stay up on the hill. And my father always remembered that for lunch, his mother would give him a piece of cheese. They had farmer's cheese, they call it, white farmer's cheese. He'd get a hunk of cheese and an apple. That was his midday snack. And he'd go up on the mountain. But anyway, I diversed. Yupek, Stanley Yupek, kind of watched out for him because during that World War I, soldiers would come through. Mostly there were Polish soldiers who would not do any harm, but nonetheless they were soldiers and they were demanding. They would want water, they would want food, whatever. They needed to be taken care of, and women were not too safe when they're around. So what happened, Stanley Yupek watched out for the family. And my father remembered going in the cellar. There was a trap door in the kitchen. You would go down in a root cellar. It was like a root cellar under there, just dirt, nothing fancy for sure. And they would go down to the two women and the children. They'd go there, and Stanley Yupek would take care of whatever soldiers came by. If they wanted water, water their horses, whatever. And so he protected them. Well, as nature would have it, you could picture my grandmother really depended on him. And the fact of the matter is, she did not have any idea when she would ever see her husband again, my Jadek, Papi's father. And she had no idea. It was a long time. And next thing, don't you know, she fell in love with the caretaker because he was taking care of him. Anyhow, in 1920, when my grandfather finally was able to get into Poland and come back to his family, right away he noticed something was not right, between his wife and that caretaker. And the more he dug into it, he realized that she, was smitten with the caretaker. So he was so mad. She was a fallen woman, because at that time, that's how men treated women. Women belonged to you. So the fact that she had fallen in love with this other guy, and well, anyway, long story short, he packed up his children. Papi was 9, and his daughter Helen was probably, Helen could have been like about 14 or so. Janka was 17, and she wanted to stay in Poland with her mother and grandmother. So my grandfather Jacob took my father John and Helen, and just John and Helen. And I have the passport at home with their names on it. And they came to America on the SS Batorek, was the name of the ship. They came by ship. And Papi told me that was the first time he ever had a banana. And he was crazy. He got to be crazy about bananas. And of course on the ship they gave him oranges also, which oranges were a big treat in Poland, because they don't grow oranges there. And the only time the kids would ever see an orange was maybe at Christmas time. It was a special thing in their stocking to have an orange. So he made a pig of himself on the boat, eating all the oranges and bananas he could get a hold of. That's all I remember of his coming to America that he talked about. And the other things that he talked about in Poland was he remembered that they were close enough to Czechoslovakia that there was a stream going right along, sort of along the border. They knew where Poland ended and Czech. And he says, if you jumped over the stream, you were in Czechoslovakia, and they had the best blueberries there. He mentioned that. And then he mentioned all the parties that were held at the Kapala farm. And you have to realize, first of all, at that time, they did not, you can't think of it in terms of a farm like we know it, with acres and acres of land around. Each farm, they had their space for gardens, their gardens and a barn and all that sort of thing. But really, the land for feeding the livestock, everybody shared. They had to, as I said, they would go up on a mountain in the grassy area, and that's where, and they sort of lived a little bit like a commune. And but he said because the grandmother did build when she got there, she did build in addition to the farmhouse. And it's sort of, Papi always said the houses that he saw in Vermont reminded him of what they had with the breezeway attached to the garage, you know, but they had a breezeway attached to a barn, so that in the winter, they got pretty strong winters there, you could walk right through the house into the barn. You didn't have to go outside in the snow and everything. You could go to feed the animals like that. So that was something else. And then because it was the newest place in Gorlice, all weddings, funerals, any meetings, whatever, took place in the Kapala barn. The whole townspeople came there. So they were a popular family because of that. And so that's what I learned from Papi. And then of course he came to Meriden, and they were sponsored. You had to have a sponsor when you came from a foreign country. But Papi was already a citizen because his mother and father, both my grandfather Jacob, who probably came to this country like in the somewhere in 1887 or something like that, and my grandmother, Anna Gubawa, they were already here in America and they were citizens. And then they went. So they actually were citizens of America when they went to Poland and got stuck with the war. So Papi and his sisters, they were already citizens. He didn't have to go for citizen because his parents were citizens. So he was a naturalized citizen of the United States when he came here. And then he got enrolled in St. Stan's. The school was there already. He got enrolled in the school, and of course because he only talked Polish, he was a little bit backwards. But St. Stan's at that time taught many subjects in Polish, even to people that were here in America. So my father had to be put back in school a little bit so that he could get the English training, which he did. He learned English and Polish. And he went to school at St. Stan's until 8th grade. And then he did not go any further, because those days they didn't push the kids for education like they did today. And he started to work in a, he started to work in a foundry, Meriden Foundry, I think. Wait a minute, I'll think of the name of it. But anyway, he started to work in a foundry with his father in a screw shop or something or other. But he started working in that foundry when he was just about 14 years old or so. And he worked there in a foundry until he was about 40 years old, 42 years old maybe. And then he worked for Platt High School. When they built Platt High School in Meriden, that had to be about 1958 or so, or 9. And he was the first wave of janitors for Platt High School. And then he stayed until he retired. And he always said that was the easiest job he ever had, was being a janitor. and he couldn't understand why some people of some nationalities would disappear and go to sleep in the closets all the time, having siestas. And he said it was such a easy, because after working in a foundry with the heavy molds and everything, to him it was a snap to be a janitor. And so that's Papi. Now Mimi, Victoria Dorothy Yajiniak, her name was, and daughter of Joseph and Leona Yajiniak. Anyway, she was born in Hartford, East Hartford, Connecticut, and I believe, and she was typical girl. She was a very girly girl when she was young, according to all the stories of her mother and other people. She was always cleaning something. Visitors would come to their house, and she would be right away cleaning the ashtrays away and tidying up right in front of their noses. And but she was a girly girl, and she ended up in Meriden, living at 106 Oak Street, right next door to Papi, who was 100 Oak Street. So they were neighbors, and they fell in love, and they ended up getting married. But she went to Meriden High School until she was 16, and then she had to quit school because her father, my judge, who I love very, very much, Joseph Yajiniak, had TB. And at that time, Meriden had the Undercliff. In Meriden, where people would have tuberculosis, they would go there for rest. And so that's my grandfather had to go, so my grandmother had to go to work, and they needed the money, and so my mother went to work also. And then my mother and father, of course, they're next door neighbors, and my mother always used to sing a song that Papi's friends would sing to her. It was somebody loves you, I want you to know, loves to be near you wherever you go. Da 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 dee dum, da dee da da dum. But that was their song in their day. And oh, you try painting the town, I'll try acting the clown. And when we do, we'll both be blue and be back together again. That was two of their kinda, their songs. And not to mention, they both loved Polish music, being Polish, and of course, music, music, music was the theme at 100 Oak Street when they got married. And always the house had friends, and they would be going somewhere on a Sunday. There was always a party. And of course, let's not forget the Polish Knights Club, Knights of the Blessed Virgin on Willow Street, Meriden, which Jacob Kapala, that was Papi's father, was one of the 6 original founders of that club. So Papi belonged all his life, and it was always in our history. So the band, sometimes they would have bands playing there, and it was Blue Laws, the Sunday Blue Laws. You couldn't keep the club open past 8 o'clock at night. So when the band would get done playing at 8 o'clock, Papi would say, "Come on, guys, 100 Oak Street." And the whole club would come up the hill to 100 Oak Street, where Mimi would be putting out sandwiches and goodies, and of course beer and drinks, and music was playing. The band would go in the living room bay window, and they would play more at 100 Oak Street, and everybody had a rousing good time. But that's what I grew up with, was that music in the house all the time. And then what else? We had a boarder named Eddie Salami, and Eddie had a room downstairs. The house that we lived in, 100 Oak, was an 8-room house with attic and cellar, big house, big yard. Anyway, but Eddie lived there, and Eddie played both the violin and the accordion. And he played every day. I think I was probably about 8 when he got married. No, wait, I was older than that. I was probably 10. So he lived with us about 4 or 5 years and before he got married, and then of course he moved out. But in those 4 or 5 years, believe me, every single day he practiced. He did not let a day go by that he didn't play both the violin and the accordion, and the house was always full of music, besides the bands that came in and the record players and whatever. We always had lots of music in the house, and so that was fun. My contemporaries, my friends from school, some that were close to me, they tell me even to this day that the most fun that they ever had was coming to play at my house, because we had so many toys. Mimi went to work when the Second World War, and with the money, I have 2 sisters, Barbara and Florence, and we're all like steps, 1 year apart, and she would go down to Worcester Bart's in town. That was the toy store. And she'd go down, and we had every girl toy and game you could imagine. So we would bring our friends over, and they were always, wow! They couldn't believe, our toys and what we had. Everybody thought we were rich. It was just that my mother splurged on us so much.
Didn't you have the first family with 2 TVs?
Oh, I don't know about
the
that.
First TV?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I thought you told me.
Chuchy Betty had a TV before me, and Emily Brighter next door had a TV. And then finally Mimi and Papi got a TV. But nevertheless, it was very happy home, good cooking. My father, John, was a very good chef, and he cooked quite a bit. And as a matter of fact, my mother was a good cook, but it was a rare household because our mother and father would argue over who's going to cook the meal on Saturday and Sunday. Each would have an idea what they wanted to cook, so they ended up, mostly Papi would cook something on a Saturday, Mimi might do Sunday or whatever. But actually had 2 people in the house that loved to cook, and they both worked during the week, and so come Sunday they're fighting who's going to cook. That was kind of interesting, and I probably got my good taste buds from that, because we always had very good tasting food, and I hope that I learned to prepare food the way they did, and so that everybody could enjoy what I made. But what else can I tell you? My sisters and I were not, we used to fight a lot, to put it bluntly. And because I was the oldest, Mimi and Papi left me in charge a lot. They would go shopping on a Saturday and say, okay, when we come back, we want the house clean. So I would take the downstairs floors, the living room, dining room, kitchen, and the piano room, and everything downstairs, and I'd send my 2 sisters, you're in charge upstairs. As you can see, I was the boss, even though I was a year and a half older than the next. We were pretty close. And so my 2 sisters would gang up against me because I was being bossy, but it was the only way to get the job done. So sometimes, I guess you could say we had a few good fights. But believe it or not, I'm now 78 and we're 77, 76, and we're still here and we're still friends. Because even though we fought and argued and everything, we really cleared the air. And I guess there had to be certain respect there because we still get along all right. And I'm sure my mother and father would be very pleased to know that. I'll tell you some of the pranks that we played as children. Our house was such that if you went in the attic, you can go out the little attic window, and there was a flat roof on the top of the addition where the kitchen and the upstairs bedroom was. So we would go on that roof, and I remember Judy Chelakevich would join us, and she was like another sister, and they would sit against the house, and whoever was performing, we all performed, you know, would go stand near the chimney, which was near the edge of the roof. And we'd dance over there, somebody be dancing, singing, whatever, you know, on top of our lungs. Well, one day we were up there, and my mother, thinking we're all angels playing in the playroom that she made up there, she was sewing in a den downstairs, and all of a sudden the neighbor from next door, Mrs. Brida, with her cane, limped over, came in the door calling, "Dory, Dory, Dory, your kids are on the roof." And poor Mimi came up the stairs and very nicely, with a big smile on her face, come on girls, I baked some chocolate chip cookies, come on in." And as we entered in through the window, we each got a crack on a behind. And of course we had to promise that we wouldn't go on a roof anymore. But of course we didn't go on that roof so much, but we had another roof that we liked to go walk on, and she didn't even know about it, and that was a little lower. And that one we used to go from window to window, bedroom to bedroom, walking on a roof and scaring the other, whoever was in the other room. Yeah, that was, yeah, we were sort of, and the other good fun was riding down the 12 steps from up for second floor down to the kitchen. We would ride in a pillow. We would sit on a pillow. Hard to believe I was ever that small. We'd take a pillow, go right inside the pillowcase and hold it like a sled and go right down the stairs. I mean, we could have been killed if our feet, you know, if our feet hit the stair, we could have just tumbled. But somehow or other, God was watching all the time, because Judy was right there with us. We'd be sliding down those stairs all the time and never got caught either.